Aston Martin's progress coming into 2023 was impressive. The team went from 7th best last year to 2nd best at some races at the beginning of the season. But while Alonso has done a fantastic job of delivering 7 podiums in that car, Lance Stroll is holding the team back with just 47 points to Alonso's 174. So what can Aston Martin do about Lance Stroll? Let's have a look. My name's Andy and this is Behind the Drive. Aston Martin's impressive progress. Aston Martin made impressive progress coming into the 2023 season. The team made a huge leap forward in the off-season, going from 7th last year to suddenly being in contention for podiums. They seem to have leapfrogged many teams including Mercedes and Ferrari, but still remained behind the Red Bull team. This giant step forward can probably be attributed to the fact that the team has grown significantly since the takeover, and they were clearly well organised to quickly bring an evolution of their car that could make this big step forward. I also believe that Sebastian Vettel, one of the team's drivers from 2022, was likely offering the team excellent feedback to ensure that they could design the car in a way that would suit the drivers and be quick in the new aerodynamic regulations. This impressive progress saw Alonso take 6 podium finishes in the opening 8 races of the season, an achievement which was particularly impressive given how dominant the Red Bull team are at the top in 2023. The Spanish champion was always in the best of the rest position and was able to maximise the results from his Aston Martin at different circuit types. He secured a podium in Bahrain, a circuit with relatively long straights and a mix of low and high speed corners, as well as Monaco, a lower speed circuit. Alonso looked comfortable in the car and was proving how talented he still is as the oldest driver on the grid, but also how well Aston Martin have designed that car and set it up for success this year. Personally, I believe that the team wouldn't have looked so good without Alonso this year. I expect Vettel would have done very well, but wouldn't have achieved as much with the car as Alonso has in 2023, and as such, perhaps their progression up the order has been elevated based on their new driver in the seat this season. Either way, the fact that Aston Martin has done so well with Alonso this year has put the spotlight increasingly on Alonso's teammate, Lance Stroll. Lance Stroll's struggles. Lance Stroll has scored 47 points to Alonso's 174 so far in 2023 at the time of recording. That means Alonso has scored 79% of the team's points this year. For a team with over 200 points in total, that difference between drivers is huge. Admittedly, Stroll has had some difficult situations and events that were somewhat out of his control. He had a mechanical issue in Saudi Arabia, a fuel issue in several practice sessions in Italy, and then a rear wing issue in Japan. These incidents are not insignificant, and problems early in a weekend may have a knock-on impact for Stroll as he tries to get even close to Alonso's speed in that car. And on top of all this, Stroll faced a challenge before the season even began with his cycling accident that cost him 3 days of pre-season testing. This, again, was a missed opportunity to share early feedback to the team and get used to the car. From there, I wouldn't be surprised if Stroll felt like he was chasing the car from that point and never felt fully comfortable behind the wheel of one of the strongest cars he's ever raced in Formula 1. On top of the issues outside of his control, Stroll has also caused some issues himself. He had a disappointing race in Monaco where he hit the barrier twice in just a handful of corners before retiring in the wet conditions. At the same time, his teammate was heading for the team's best result of the season so far. Similarly, in Singapore, Stroll's huge crash in qualifying was caused by him having to push hard to make it into Q2. The Canadian driver was out of position and blamed several factors, including being called into the weigh station by the FIA earlier, dirty air, and significant traffic on the street circuit. But really, the reason he was having to push the car to get more pace from it was because he wasn't up to speed that weekend. So really, I think it's difficult not to blame the driver for the incident which meant he missed that weekend's race. There's no doubt that on his best weekend, Stroll can be one of the top drivers in the sport. His performances in Baku as a rookie, his pole position at Turkey in 2020, and then his podium later that year at the Sakir Grand Prix spring to mind as great examples of this. But sadly, these results are few and far between. When you make a direct comparison between Stroll and Alonso, the current situation looks dreadful. It's clear that Stroll is not up to the standard of his teammate, and while that in itself is okay, the bigger issue is the fact that he isn't even close. Nobody expects Stroll to be delivering 7 podiums a year, just as Alonso has done so far, but he needs to find a way to up his performance if he wants to not look like he's lost in that team. So Stroll's 2023 struggles have been clear for all to see. It's important to recognise that his early season injury may have had a longer term impact than we anticipated. But the fact that he's still a long way behind Alonso means this is probably his best that he's showing at this point in the year. This poor performance is likely causing the Aston Martin team a bit of a headache. Stroll is the team owner's son, and so it seems likely that he will have a seat for as long as he wants on the F1 grid. He's a talented driver, and I hope he's still learning from his more experienced teammate. But the team personnel and sponsors associated with Aston Martin will want both drivers to deliver at their best so that they can secure more points and compete higher up in the championship order. Right now, with McLaren making huge progress through this year, the Aston Martin team's at risk of ending up 5th in this championship. Sure, this is still 2 positions higher than last year, and they've bridged the gap from the midfield to the teams just behind Red Bull. But even so, with 2 strong drivers in the team delivering more points, it's quite clear that Aston Martin would be far higher up the championship order. Aston Martin's future. Aston Martin's future has clearly got Lance Stroll in mind. The team hasn't really declared how long Stroll's contract will last, but he is contracted to 2024 at least, and it seems likely that he'll be continuing with that team for the foreseeable future. During this time, I expect Stroll will continue to learn from Alonso. It's clear that Stroll is a talented driver and is capable of delivering solid results for the team. Even looking back to 2022, it felt like he got closer to Vettel's performances towards the end of the season. With another year to benchmark against Alonso, I'm sure Stroll will move forwards and get closer to the Spanish champion, but it seems very unlikely that Stroll will be able to lead the team after then. Of course, Alonso may continue with Aston Martin, assuming he's still enjoying his time in the sport. But with Stroll in the team, joining the Aston Martin team to replace Alonso is probably an attractive proposition for several drivers on the grid. Since the team became Aston Martin, they've wanted to have an experienced world champion driver alongside Stroll. And while they may not be able to bring in another world champion into the team, it seems like there may be some talented drivers that may want to go to a team where they're unlikely to win the Constructors' Championship, but could win the driver's title and be the definitive number 1 driver of the team. Looking at drivers that may be available in the future, the likes of Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz, Lando Norris or Alex Albon may well be interested in a move for this potential benefit in the future. Being a clear number 1 driver is certainly a benefit. However, at the same time, in recent times, unless a car has been clearly better than all the others, having 2 drivers in the fight to support one to the Drivers' Championship is a clear benefit. While a driver moving to race alongside Stroll knows that they will likely be the number 1, they may also struggle to compete if other top teams have 2 talented drivers. All the while, the influence of sponsors and team personnel could grow within Aston Martin. If one of their drivers is scoring just 21% of their points each year, then surely the pressure on Lawrence Stroll's shoulders to look to replace Lance Stroll will be significant. Lance Stroll is not a bad driver by any means. He's able to compete on the F1 grid after all, but he isn't in the top tier of drivers that he's competing against at the sharp end of the F1 grid right now. If Aston Martin had 2 drivers capable of achieving that, then it's clear that they would be in a secure 4th in the championship or maybe even in the top 3. The team has had a great year regardless of what happens between now and Abu Dhabi, but the team is going to be under increasing pressure to have 2 top drivers in the team if they want to be a serious title contender in the next few seasons, which is their long-term ambition in Formula 1. By keeping Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin seat, I believe the team is committing to the Drivers' Championship more than the Constructors. They will struggle to deliver the number of consistent performances needed from both drivers to do well in the Constructors. In Alonso, the team has an excellent top-tier driver that is realistically in the top 3 drivers on the grid right now, and I believe if the team are able to keep showing the pace Alonso has this season, then they will surely attract more top talent to the team in future. But there's no doubt that Lance Stroll is holding this team back right now, and that's probably causing a headache for some people in that team.